So we just started this past week a new series called I Am. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? And I think one of the best ways that you can find out who somebody is maybe rather than hearing from others who they say they are, what if we heard it from that person himself? And so we're in a series for the next few weeks where we actually get to see not just what Jesus did, but who he says he is. Who he says he is. I am who is Jesus. So we're going to go right into our scripture this morning, and it comes from John chapter 8. And here we go. All right, verse 12. Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. And the Pharisees replied, you are making those claims about yourself. Such testimony is not valid. And so what we have here is Jesus is making a really big claim about himself. And then we have some people who question what he's saying. Like, you just made a really big statement that we're going to discuss together for a few minutes, and then you have some people giving some pushback. Like, are you sure that you really want to make that big of a claim? And there are people who are questioning who Jesus says he is, and maybe even some of us in this room are kind of questioning, Jesus, are you really who you say you are? Are you really who some of these Christians, friends of mine, are saying you are? And maybe if you yourself aren't questioning, maybe you have some friends who might be questioning. I think it might be good for all of us to push ourselves a little bit into this conversation and to see who is this Jesus, and how do we know that it really is true what he says about himself. So before we get in, I just remember when I first moved here from Egypt, I was in third grade. And I had this teacher. Her name is Mrs. Budd. And Mrs. Budd, what a great name, right? She had us do a school project, and we had to pick a historical figure to come in. We dressed up as this historical figure. We gave a little presentation about who they are and told our class about this person. And so I knew nothing about American history, so I had to look up who is this person and who can I present to this class. And so I thought, well, I don't know, usually you would think, a major figure would be like a political person, a king, a ruler, a president, someone from American history, but I didn't really know anybody, so I found this guy who was an inventor. And you would think an inventor, that doesn't seem like someone who would really be a historical figure, someone who makes a huge difference. Unless their invention changed how you live your life forever. And this inventor that I landed on was a person who really did, through his invention, change the way we all live our life forever. This person's name was Thomas Edison. Probably have heard the name before. He's the guy who invented the light bulb. Before this guy, when the sun sets, that's maybe light some candles, but that's basically the end of your day. The sun sets, there's no more light. And you think about it yourself, right? How different would your life be, would your evenings be if you had no light? I mean, you wouldn't have a phone, you wouldn't have a computer, you wouldn't have lights in your house. So many things in our regular day-to-day that we don't even think about was changed through this invention of the light bulb. Invention of the light. And if you think, man, how big of a change light made in our life, in our current day life, this statement that Jesus says about himself, if he says, I am the light of the world, how big of a statement is that? If our little light bulbs changed our world, what would it be like if Jesus is the light of the world, and he's saying, I am the light of the world. And so this morning, as we get into it together, we're going to have two main points that we're focusing on. The first one is this: the light of the world and the light of your world. The light of the world and the light of your world. And when we hear Jesus saying this, sometimes we're not really sure of what is going on around him, but what we understand is that Jesus, when he shared this bit of information, he was standing in the temple of Jerusalem. And as he's standing in this temple, they had just finished this 7-day celebration called the Feast of Tabernacle, where they're celebrating and they're remembering how God led their people, the Israelites, out of slavery and into freedom, and he would lead them at night through the darkness, through this pillar of fire. And so all of these Israelites, they're there and they're celebrating and they remember how God would lead them with this pillar of light in the darkness. And so to remember that in this feast that they celebrate for 7 days straight, every night, there would be these 4 pillars, kind of like, imagine something like this, a pillar like this and a pillar like that, and there'd be 4 in the temple, and each of them would have these 4 bowls. And the 4 bowls would be lit up at night. So much so that it would almost shine a light in the whole city. The lights would reflect off the walls and off of the temples and off the building. And so their nightlife specifically, would be changed for an entire week. They could see in the darkness and they remember that this is how God led them in the darkness. But this was a religious tradition. It was something that they did, and now here we get to the end of the celebration. And at the end of this celebration, they don't light the bowls anymore. They don't light them up with fire anymore. So it's the 8th day. Celebration's over. People are still there, but they're not going to see at night. And so Jesus shares this huge statement, saying, I am the light of the world, when the light has gone out. When this religious ceremony, when this practice that they do ends. He wants to make a really powerful point. And sometimes I hear people telling me, you know what, Kika, I think religion is just a crutch. It's just something to hold you over for a little bit, to get you through the hard times. And when I think about this celebration that they had for a week, it's short-lived. It's not this eternal thing. It's just, we remember that time, and it got us through the hard times, and then it ended. And then it ends, and then we go through the rest of our month and the rest of our weeks without that light at night. And here comes Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. I'm not just some light that shines for a week, that's a crutch for the time that you're going through a hard time, for a time where you're walking through some difficulty. No, I am the light of the world, and I don't go out like these lights are now out. I'm here to stay. I am the light that's going to shine in your world. And these Jewish people who are listening to Jesus say this, they think about how light is a very strong image in their culture. They remember that at the beginning, what they know in Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And watch this. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters. There was darkness in the earth. How did it change? Then God said, let there be light. Let there be light. Before the light, there was darkness. Before the light, there was emptiness. Before the light, the world was purposeless. It had nothing going on. But then God said, let there be light. God creates light. The emptiness, the darkness in the world is now filled with light. It's now filled with life. It's now filled with purpose. And as Jesus says, I am the light of the world, people listening think, wow, It's a big statement because when God created light, he filled us with life. When God created light, he gave the world a purpose. He gave the world life. So if you're saying that you are the light of the world, are you telling me that you're the one who fills my emptiness? Who fills my darkness? Who fills this space within me that feels like it has no purpose? See, Jesus is not just the light of the world, but he is the light of your world. Because when he says, I am the light of the world, he's not just talking about, okay, I'm going to light up the darkness in your streets and in your city. No, he's saying, I'm going to light up the darkness that is sin, that is brokenness in our world, and I am here to change it, to redeem it, to bring it back to how it was supposed to be from the beginning. He is the light of your life. He knows that people listening here today might have a space in their heart that is maybe filled with some darkness, that is maybe filled with some emptiness. And I remember I went through a book with some of our young adults crew a few months ago called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. I love this book. It's so good. And this author, his name is Pete Scazzaro, he talks about how all of us have something in our hearts called the shadow side. He calls it the shadow side. And the shadow side is something that maybe you don't always see, but it's deeply ingrained in you. It comes out of your history, maybe your family history, maybe the things that you've gone through, your experiences, and it reveals itself through maybe some darkness that comes out of you. The ways that you treat people, the ways that you talk to people. Maybe it's a sin of selfishness, it's a sin of lust, it's a sin of greed, it's a sin, whatever it might be. And I remember reading this, and he's talking about your shadow side, and I thought, do I have a shadow side? And I didn't realize how much of a shadow side I had until I got married. I got married and I have a relationship, and parts of you come out in this really close relationship that you've maybe never seen yourself before. And I realized, wow, I'm responding in ways that I didn't think I would respond. I'm speaking in ways that I didn't think I would speak in, and that was my shadow side coming out, even though I was a Christian. Even though I had been a Christian for years, and we had a Christian wedding ceremony, and we had all these Christian things in our life, I thought I already received Jesus as the light of the world. But I think it's so much easier to receive Jesus as the light of the world and forget that he's also the light of your world. He's the light of my world. And so as I processed this and as I thought about this, oh my gosh, wow, there is still darkness. There is still the shadow side in me, even though I believe in Jesus. And some of us in this room are already Christians. And you're saying, great, I already believe that Jesus is the light of the world. That's awesome. But maybe you, like me, don't realize that even though you're already a Christian, even though you already believe that he is the light of the world, you haven't let him be the light of your world. The light that shines in the darkness in your heart and your mind and your soul. You haven't let him shine a light in the spaces of your life that nobody knows about. And you're walking in darkness, you're living in darkness, and Jesus is saying, listen, I don't want you to walk in darkness anymore. I want you to walk in the light. I want you to walk in the light of life. Follow me. Isn't it interesting that not only is Jesus the one who talks about light and darkness, but even in our culture today, I mean, maybe some of you have seen Star Wars. There's the good people, and then the bad people are called the dark side. The dark side. How much imagery do we have in our culture of this light and this dark? So even today, as we listen to Jesus saying, I am the light of the world, we understand that he's not just talking about a light bulb. He's not just talking about how he's going to light our city. He's talking about darkness that he wants to light up in our lives. He wants to be the light not just of the world, but the light of your world. So that's our first point. The second thing that we want to talk about, calling it as clear as daylight. Now, Jesus is making a pretty big statement like we've already talked about, and the people listening to him are questioning, are you sure that you really are the light of the world? That's a huge statement to make. Are you sure that you're the light of the world? And if you say that you are the light of the world, you're putting yourself in a pretty hard position if you're not the light of the world. I mean, imagine I come up to you and I say, hey guys, I glow in the dark. No, you don't. I hope you would call poison control or something, because then I would probably drink something that I should not have drank. But maybe I tell you I glow in the dark, and no, you don't. Yes, I do. Okay, prove it. You take me into a dark room, and you close the shades, and you turn off the lights, and you're like, all right, I don't glow in the dark. If you say that you are light, it's pretty easy to test if that's true or not. If I tell you I glow in the dark and I don't, it's going to be as clear as daylight that I don't glow in the dark. But when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, it's also as clear as daylight that he is. If you look at the life that Jesus lives out, especially towards the end of his life, one of the most climactic moments of his life was a moment where he proved, as clear as daylight, that he is the light of the world. See, even the deepest darkness of death could not conceal his light. He was crucified and buried, and they thought that it was over. They turned off the lights. They thought he wouldn't shine anymore. But 3 days later, that darkness is gone. The light of the world had come back from the dead, because even the deepest darkness of the world cannot conceal his light. And even the deepest darkness of your heart, even the deepest darkness of your soul, the things that nobody knows about, the things that you're struggling with that you're not really sure if there's anybody that you can talk to about, he's willing to come in to shine a light, not just of the world, but he wants to shine a light in your world. And isn't it interesting that Jesus not only calls himself the light of the world, but then he also turns to his followers later on, not just in this very specific passage, but in another passage. Jesus turns to his followers and he says, You are the light of the world. Just as I am the light of the world, you are the light of the world. Just as it is as clear as daylight to the world that I am Jesus, that I am light, if you are my follower, it should be as clear as daylight. Your community, that you are also the light of the world, that you are walking in the light of Jesus. Just as he is the light of the world, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. So I want to ask you a pretty direct question. Does your neighbor, your next door neighbor, do they know that you're a light? Like if the world is a dark place, when you walk across their yard, their house, have a conversation with them, do they see a light or do they not? If we are supposed to be like Jesus and be light as clear as daylight, if our neighbors don't know that we are the light, what steps do we need to take? to be the light as Jesus calls us to be the light? How are we to do that? How are you to do that? And then I want to ask us as a community, if we are supposed to be the light as a church community, as Christians together, how do our neighbors think of us? How does our community think of us? Do they even know that we exist? When it's dark in this world, do they see a light that shines in the darkness? For goodness sakes, our church is called Lighthouse Church. We're called Lighthouse Church. We are even putting it in our own name that we are supposed to be a light. We are called to be the light of the world, a light in our community. And as the band comes up here to close this out, I want you to think, even our Arabic church, our little motto is we are a lighthouse for Jesus Christ. Are we being a light in our community? Are you as clear as daylight, the light of the world? And so I want to close with these two questions. First question is this: are you willing to allow Jesus to be the light of your world? And the second question that I want to ask you, maybe we can put this up. Second question is, are you willing to be the light in your world? Are you willing to allow Jesus to be the light of your world? To let him shine a light in the darkness and the emptiness that's in your heart? Even if you've been a Christian for a long time, maybe like me, you get to a place where you're like, wow, I know I believe in Jesus, but have I let him be the light of my life? Have I let him shine his light that's as clear as daylight into my darkness? Maybe this morning you make a decision to say, Jesus, I want you to light up my world. I want you to light up my heart. I want you to reveal in me the things that you need to purify, that you want to purify, so that I can shine more brightly for you. See, because in order to fulfill that second question, in order to do that second question well, we have to first allow Jesus to be the light of your world. If he hasn't shined in your heart, if he hasn't purified your heart, you are only going to be a little dying flashlight in your world. But if you want to shine brightly for Jesus, if you want to be a difference maker in your community, if you want to shine brightly in your family, with your friends, at your gym, in your sports, in your school, whatever it is that you're doing, if you want to shine brightly, you have to allow him to light up your world, your heart. And we just sang this last song together, lead me in your love to those around me. How can I be led into love to those around me? It starts by letting him be the light of your heart. It starts by letting him be the one that you are building your foundation on. We've got to believe this morning that Jesus is not just the light of the world, but we've got to let him be the light of our world. And when we live that way, we can shine brightly. You can shine brightly in your world. It'll be as clear as daylight. Who you live for, who you worship. His light is as clear as daylight, and so can yours.